Вітаю вас, ви дивитесь 5 канал, мене звати Андрій Сусленко. Сьогодні завдяки школі управління Українського католицького університету ми маємо можливість зустрітися з професором Френсісом Фукуяма, який до Києва завітав. Professor, welcome to this program.
Thank you.
We don't have much time, so let's go into details right away. You've been working here with young Ukrainian politicians who are empowered to produce the changes to this country. Do you see that potential over here in this room with these people, young politicians, is that big that you could still trust that they could they could deliver the change here?
Well, I don't know whether any particular group of people that I work with are going to actually be able to make the changes that we're hoping for, but I don't see any other way of proceeding. Because I think in a country like Ukraine, you have a existing elite that's left over from Soviet times. They're very resistant, a lot of corruption. And frankly, the only way you change an entire system like that is to have generational change. And that's why we deliberately tailored a program towards younger, up-and-coming, mid-career people who will be very important leaders in another 10 years or so, or 15 years.
This is the Emerging Leaders program that is going to take the start in Stanford.
Well, no, there's two separate ones. So what I'm here in Lviv and Kiev for is something called the Leadership Academy for Development, where we actually do a training program for a week. Then there's also this Ukrainian Emerging Leaders program where we're going to bring a very small number of Ukrainians to Stanford for an academic year.
And you should know that this program has been up to only for 10 days. And probably every second person that I know from my environment is actually eager to apply. So right. you can see that it's a big deal for us, and we want to emerge as leaders for sure.
Sure.
And about the potential, the leadership potential, you have worked with different Ukrainians in different contexts, within different fellowships and programs in Stanford in the United States. Could you describe the specific way or approach of the leadership that these people possess?
Well, I don't know that there's a specific Ukrainian approach. I think that, like many countries, people get good educations, but it tends to be fairly technocratic. And I think what we're trying to do is to teach people that if you actually want to bring about change, you need that technocratic base, but you also need to understand how the political world works and how to get results when you're facing constraints of various sorts. So not everybody supports you. You've got stakeholders that are really opposed to what you're doing, and how do you convince them and bring them along, build a coalition that actually will bring about real change.
So this is also what you are teaching in Stanford.
Yes.
I suppose. And this is also the question that I would like you to answer. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the way of education here in Ukraine, but you're definitely familiar with the way that United States or different universities in the United States are educating their people. Could you elaborate key principles for Stanford?
So, I think traditional education in Ukraine was actually fairly authoritarian, meaning you've got a professor just reads a lecture, the students, maybe get a chance to ask a question, but oftentimes not, and you're just supposed to write down, the notes. We have a case-based system of training where you read a case about a real-world decision maker, and it's extremely interactive right from the beginning, where the student has to put themselves in the position of a decision maker and discuss with other fellow students, how do you solve this problem? And I think that's the way that we want to try to teach leadership, because you have to actually put yourself in a concrete situation where you've got a real-world problem, and it's not an obvious solution to that problem, and that's what you've got to get to.
With the real-world problems, if you don't mind, let's step into the newsroom. Recent events, Donald Trump is the president, Brexit, which is marching on, uprise of populist parties and far-right parties in Europe. Do we see the world is coming to the bifurcation spot where we could never see the democracy and the ideologies that were working before in future?
Well, I don't think any of that's going to disappear, but it is a real potential turning point in world history, because I think there are a lot of populist forces that are upset with the effects of globalization, and a lot of political entrepreneurs like Donald Trump or Viktor Orban have risen to kind of mobilize these groups. And I think it's a threat to our liberal order because they want to use their democratic mandate to get around rules that they think have not been beneficial to them.
But if we're going to talk about the political future of the globe, if we can, of course, do you see that the democratic standards are being abused? Well, probably it's evident. But then, if you see the nearest future, there's some power that could emerge or that could just evolve that could actually counter it.
Well, I think that there's a number of illiberal countries like Putin's Russia or Erdogan's Turkey, Orban's Hungary. I think, however, that there's also a very strong commitment. The one thing that you need to understand about all of these leaders is their power base are the least educated, older people. They live not in the big cities, that are at the forefront of technological innovation. These are people that are nostalgic for a past that they experienced a long time ago, but it's a past that's also disappearing. So I do think that there's a movement, a broader movement in our social and economic development that is not necessarily helpful to this kind of populism.
Populism was able to rise also through the media. Well, we know it for sure. And I wanted to talk to you about post-truth thing, this word that actually became a word of the year in 2016.
Yes.
And I'm a journalist, and I'm very frustrated because I don't see the way that we could tackle post-truth yet, except the fact-checking probably. But then how do we, if you can help me here, how do we make people who are reading the news, the distribution of news, how do we make them to fact-check or at least to be critical?
Well, look, before we get to the solution, we have to analyze the problem, and I think the problem was actually the whole internet revolution because it got rid of all the intermediaries like editors and gatekeepers of various sorts that restricted access to being able to publish, but also were responsible for quality control. And now you've got an internet where anybody can say anything, and a lot of people will believe anything that they read on the internet because you don't have these gatekeepers. And so I think that, I guess the further problem is that you've got social media that then amplifies bad information. The old idea was that the way to counter bad information is just to put good information out there, and then there's a marketplace of ideas, and the good ideas will rise to the top. But when you've got all these bots and trolls, and a lot of them are deliberately being pushed by countries like Russia, that old solution, I think, doesn't necessarily work. So I honestly don't know what the solution is. Obviously, you've got to protect institutions that do put out credible information, which is a lot of the established media. But it's basically a political struggle. I mean, the reason that the established media is under attack is that it doesn't serve the interests of these new populists. So Donald Trump is willing to try to discredit anybody that says anything that hurts his feelings. It's a very authoritarian kind of instinct. I think it's a political struggle then. You just got to get people like him out of power.
But how can we do that? Because
those people, so you do that very simply. I mean, you go and vote in 2 years, or you go and vote in 4 years, and you protest and you. But the thing is, it's not something that's going to be solved by some technical intervention, the invention of some new app or something of that sort. I mean, it is fundamentally a political struggle because, what's powering him and what makes people want to believe him is the movement that stands behind him, and you've got to fight that movement. That's I think the only way that.
But the movement behind populists, and you mentioned that yesterday, the way that politicians can appeal to the hearts with simple words, and that's one of the reasons that you mentioned that Hillary Clinton actually didn't have a chance to win, basically. And so then I would think that the reason here is because we are illiterate as voters, and this is the thing that we need to tackle.
Well, no, I think that that's kind of an illusion. You're never going to educate populations, and then frankly, educated people believe a lot of stupid things also, So I think politics is largely a contest over emotions, and there's no reason that people supporting what I think would be good policies can't also appeal to emotion, and that's what a brilliant politician does. Sometimes you have them on the right, but sometimes you have them on the left. Sometimes you have them supporting, good ideas. I think it's, you just have to understand that you need the right kind of politics and the right kind of message and be able to communicate that effectively in this new technology world that's changing very rapidly. I think that's ultimately what's going to be required.
And then, Professor Fukuyama, there's the thing I want to ask you. So you teach a lot of people, and a lot of people are becoming very educated or becoming very efficient in what they're doing, with the new leadership skills and new approaches because of your approaches and your colleagues, other professors' approaches, and the impact that you have. But then in the end, are they coming back to you and saying, "Thank you very much, Mr. Fukuyama. We've got to this point right now. Now we provide changes. We do the impact." How do you feel when you get that?
Well, I think it may be premature. I mean, some people do say things like that, but what I'm really hoping for is that, somebody that goes through one of these programs, in 10 years or 15 years will be a minister or a prime minister, right, or, in a real position of responsibility, and will remember something, that they were taught about how to get to effective policy change, and will do something really good for their country. I think that's really the reward, and it may not happen for quite a while.
Thank you very much for your time, and good luck in future.
Okay, thank you very much.